Good evening and welcome. My name's Claire Bell, and I am the Associate Director of the Miriam and Ira D. Wallach Division here at the library, which is really one of the most important global repositories of prints, photographs, visual materials, and books on and by artists. So I want to welcome everyone here in the room tonight and those of you who are streaming live at home. Tonight I have really the wonderful pleasure of introducing our guest speakers. First, I have the good fortune of introducing Michael Stipe. Yes. Michael, as you know, was the lead singer and a songwriter for R.E.M. That took up 30 years of his career, but even more so, Michael has been a photographer, and we're here to celebrate Michael's fourth photographic book. The name of his book is Even the Birds Gave Pause. The book presents a series of works in progress that continue his exploration of contemporary portraiture. They dovetail with Michael's exhibition that just closed in March of 2024 at the ICA Milan Foundation in Italy, which showcased his work. Joining Michael tonight in conversation, and whom I also have the pleasure of introducing, is Taryn Simon. Taryn is also a multiversed artist whose deep connections to research and the library, particularly our picture collection, was showcased in her work, The Color of a Flea's Eye. It featured work dedicated to the picture collection's founder, Romana Javits, and Taryn created these pieces over 9 years of exploration in the New York Public Library's picture collection. Her show opened, in fact, in this very room in September of 2021 and was on view through 2022. Just a few little things. After Michael and Taryn speak, Michael said he'd be glad to take some of your questions. We've left some note cards for you, and library staff will come around periodically to collect them with your questions. And if you're watching online, you can put your questions in the chat or email it to publicprograms@nypl.org. Wherever you are, we certainly would love to hear from you after the talk. Michael's book, Even the Birds Gave Pause, is available for purchase tonight, and that'll be at the back of the room. Your purchase will not only go to support the library, but Michael will also be signing books after the conversation, so that's going to be very exciting. And what I wanted to also mention is that also in the back of the room is a selection of photographs from the Wallach division that was put together by the Robert Menschel Curator of Photography, Elizabeth Cronin, who joins us tonight as well. The photography collection at the library is one of the largest collections of the medium in the US. It includes examples of every photographic process and is especially strong in the first years of photography. American photography from the 1930s and 40s, and works by New York-based photographers from the 70s and the 80s. We encourage you to really come to our reading rooms where staff would be happy to consult with you also with your research, but we also encourage you to take a look at some of the examples. I also wanted to note that Live from New York is made possible by the continuing generosity of Celeste Bartos, Manaz Ispahani Bartos, and Adam Bartos, and of course by all of you. Thank you for that support, and thank you again for being here. So I'd like to please welcome Taryn Simon and Michael Stipe.
Hello. Thank you, Claire, for that introduction. And before we get started, I want to thank Aidan Flax Clark and the director of Live from NYPL, and also David Belisle for helping set all this up.
I also thank you all for being here to discuss Michael's work in so many different directions. He works in many mediums and with an explosive mind. But I also wanted to thank the library for letting us be here and have this conversation in this room, which is so important amongst the ghosts of everyone who came before us, and just to acknowledge the budget cuts that they're under right now. And I think it's an alarm that we all need to kind of react to and respond to and care about. It's, I think, in these times of discontent and division, public space and places of shared knowledge and community are more important than ever. So,
Yeah, I mean, I was going to somehow work it into our conversation, but a couple of days ago, my boyfriend Toma and I went to the Grand Army Plaza in Brooklyn for a Queers Against Mayor Adams budget cuts. And it was really fun. It was a great group of people. It was blazing hot, but there was someone handing out free water. It was really a great activist crowd. And I think we all need to raise these voices, particularly now. Libraries are one thing that are obviously going to suffer, and we don't need a cop city in New York City. That's that. Okay.
yeah. So I'm just going to dive right into a series of questions that I prepared ahead of time that Michael doesn't know anything about. So
No.
hopefully they're not going to...
I'm also jet lagged, a little bit of a, yeah, so I just arrived back from Paris, and we'll get into that later. But can we cue the slides?
Yes.
There's a slideshow, so
Yeah.
you can watch.
So images from the book, the new book.
Yeah.
But I'm going to start more generally, which
Okay.
is I've known Michael for a long while and have known him long enough to observe that he doesn't see or sound in familiar ways. And by that, I'm referring to both your voice, which is one of those rare, weird, distinctive, otherworldly voices, but also to your vision. And when you sing, you roll your eyes into the back of your head, and you almost blind yourself when you're deep in your voice. And I was wondering, what do you associate with that moment visually, if anything?
Abject horror. The first time that the band were, my former band R.E.M., the first time that we were videotaped and we were performing live, and it turned into one of the first videos for this new thing called MTV at the time. I saw the close-up, and my eyes rolled back in my head, and I was like, holy shit, is that what I look like when I sing? This is horrifying. So I learned, it took years, but I learned how to, especially on live TV, I learned how to stare and not have my eyes roll back. But I can tell you, per your question, what that's about. It took me a long time to figure it out. I don't hear music, I see music more, and good music, bad music just annoys me. But good and great music, I see, I see things, and I'm not on the spectrum. I'm maybe spectrum adjacent in some way, but that's not funny, is it? It is, I guess. Yeah, why not? Greta Thunberg said that autism was her superpower, and I took from a 15-year-old statement and said, wow, vulnerability is my superpower, so I'm going to go with it. Thank you, Greta, very much for that.
What you see.
What I see. Well, so yeah, like as a lyricist, my job is to people the landscape that I see, or the vista. I always call it a vista that I see when I'm presented with good or great music, or potentially great music. And when my eyes roll back, what I'm doing is I'm following the note. So you'll notice, if anyone cares to look, that the notes where my eyes are rolling back are the ones where I'm ascending. And so I'm watching the note go up. And if I'm not doing that, my hand is moving like a guppy or something. And that's also helping move the note.
Right,
Yeah.
amazing.
Yeah.
You were just telling me, Michael sees things that other people don't see. We were just discussing an artwork he made where he made molds from the underneath of a chair, as opposed to seeing the chair, you saw the negative space. You just...
That was, it's an homage to Bruce Nauman, the great American conceptual artist, and also an homage to Brancusi, who's a hero of mine, and whose exhibition I just saw at the Pompidou in Paris, and we went back a second day because I had so many, I was crying for some of the moments. You see this work in a gallery setting, with, in some cases, with Paris behind you, and it's just so magnificent what he was doing, you know?
Yep.
No.
So you were born on an army base and grew up in a military family down south.
Yes.
In an environment where you probably didn't see or have the chance to interact with many people like yourself. And I was thinking about how artists create versions of themselves through music, through the objects they make, through the photographs they take. And for some, art can, I think, dramatize that relationship between what they are and what they want to be. And is an impulse like that rooted for you in those early days?
I would have to say yes, but also my father was a amateur photographer. He loved taking pictures, and so as far back as I can remember, there was a Nikon that he bought in Korea when he was serving in the U.S. Army, and he would take photos, and so there's that. But he was also a very eccentric man, and I don't like the E words, you know. As a public figure. When journalists were trying to describe me, I was always enigmatic, which I think was their way of saying queer in 1983, and or I was enigmatic or eccentric, right? But my father was truly eccentric, and I didn't really realize the degree to which he was an eccentric person nor his humor, until really near the end of his life, and I go back and I think of things that he would say over and over again, and it still makes me laugh. I feel him very, very presently here right now, in fact. But he had this great sense of humor. I think that I had that as an example of what you can be beyond what you present. Mm-hmm. And as I grew older, you know, it became evident to me that yes, I was different. I was a daydreamer. I had real hard time with certain topics. Certain things like spelling were really hard for me. I was left-handed, so when the teacher said, "This is how you write a word," I wrote from right to left, and I wrote mirror image until I was in 6th grade. And then my English teacher told me that my brain was going to flip-flop like two fish if I kept doing that, and so I stopped. But I can still, if I'm at a desk with someone and they're reading something, I can read it upside down and I can still write backwards. So that's nice. But I was left-handed and then I was queer, and so it was, you know, it's different. You're just different.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
I'm going to skip there's a perceived cultural divide or contention between the people who protect and run this country and art production at all levels. So I'm thinking about your childhood and growing up in and around military and family. I'm curious about your relationship to patriotic duty in your work, just generally, and does art always have to push against systems of power to be forward-thinking? Or how do you think about that? Because you come from such a specific background, yet you go in this very other direction.
Well, I mean, it's very, you know, even then, in the 60s and 70s, the military was very conservative and very regimented, is maybe a better word, in the way it presented, this is the way things are. And I understand, I'm a pacifist. I grew up around that. I saw it firsthand. I saw the effect and the impact that it had on my family and on my father, being in active duty as a helicopter pilot in Vietnam and in Korea. And it's not for nothing. I understand military, and I acknowledge the importance of the military in the real world. That said, I am a pacifist. I don't like confrontation. I don't like injustice. And when I'm faced with that, whether through politics or other things, I react to it. And as an artist, particularly as a songwriter, as a lyricist, sometimes those reactions came out in the lyric and completely unexpectedly. But I'm thinking of a song called Disturbance at the Heron House, which was kind of my version of Animal Farm, which I never actually read. Sorry, New York Public Library. I also have a really hard time reading, so reading is not easy for me because I'm very easily distracted. There are certain writers like Joan Didion and Douglas Coupland who for me are very easy to read because of the way that they write. And there's some books that I recommended. I don't know if they've flashed up or not, but
It's in the pamphlet
yeah.
that they all have.
Oh yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, those are really good books if anyone is interested in something for your reading list.
You know, the library
Did I answer
holds...
your question at all?
I mean,
Not so
sort of,
much.
yes, you did. You
Yeah,
talked
okay.
about being a pacifist and wanting to confront injustices in your work is
Yeah.
how I'm reading it,
Yeah.
and that it is important somewhere layered in there.
Well, also
But
traveling with the band, you know, we went to Europe and people were like, "What the fuck are you doing? This is under Reagan."
Yeah.
And they're like, "What? You know, what's with the cruise missiles?" And we're like, "It's not us.
Right.
We don't like him." But you know, you become politicized very quickly and very easily because you are representing your country as a pop star traveling through Europe, you know, or the Far East, and yeah. So, like it or not, we kind of saw where our place in the world was and how it looks from outside versus from inside. I don't think it's a true. Does Harper's Index still exist? Is there still a Harper's Index? I think there is, right? I don't think it's still true, but like I think the percentage of Americans who own passports is in the single digits. And that's just so sad, you know. It would be so cool if a bunch of people could just travel a little bit, like if they could get 2 weeks off and go somewhere that's not Cancun, you know.
It's interesting, you brought up Animal Farm, and it makes me think of the library because they actually own the rejection letter from Knopf, where
wow.
it reads, "It's a stupid and pointless fable in which animals try to take over," and it said, like, definitely NFK, not for Knopf, exclamation point
Wow.
or something. But it's an amazing artifact. But I was just thinking about, does that make you think of any moment where you were flat out rejected?
Oh yeah, I mean, yeah.
Can you tell us one?
Like by record companies
Or in your art where you maybe felt, because now I feel like you've had institutional exhibition, you're doing books, to make that crossover is sometimes harder when you're coming from such a fixed identity in the public's eye. So.
Yeah, I'm the pop star who has a hobby, and or former pop star who has a hobby, and that's not good. You know, I took pictures longer than I love music and sang, and for me, you know, however flawed these books might be, they mean a lot to me, and I can, you know, like the music, I can look at them and go, maybe not my best, but I really thought it was at the time, and I really tried to have a point of view, and I tried to get that across in a way that's understandable and available to everyone. That's another thing, as an artist in all mediums, you know, the cast of the space under my cheap plastic chair, that's the title of the piece. I want every single person who walks into that gallery to look at that thing and look at the name and laugh or go, oh, I get it. I understand what this is. This isn't some highfalutin academic conceptual nothing that is speaking to a very small number of people. I want to talk to everybody. Yeah, how do we get there?
But it's also a different way of looking, which is what you've done since you were a child.
Yeah, you too, though. I mean, come on. I'm a great fan of Taryn's work, I have to say. And the fact that she knows that the dismissal letter for Animal Farm is here in the public library. Meet Taryn Simon.
Okay. So the new book you've made is about showing private processes, right? And behind the scenes of making things, sculptures, graphic design, photographs, but also a life and your private life.
Yeah.
So by showing us this, you're taking away that one sliver, a layer of privacy that I know you hold tightly or
Very
have held
dear.
tightly.
Yeah.
So someone once told me, if you want to protect a memory, you should never speak of it, because every time you do, you'll change it. And I'm just wondering, do you care about privacy, and in what ways, and how does the idea of it affect what you make?
I do care very much. I care very much about privacy, and I have. For a very long time, and I fought for it, and I still fight for it. Although it seems like it's really an uphill battle at this point with digital technology, where it has arrived, and AI coming in full bore. The idea of privacy seems archaic and ridiculous. And you know, I'm looking at the pictures here that you guys are watching. We have a monitor. You know, these are people in my life, and I would be very careful. I would not present. No one's in the book without knowing that they're in the book. In fact, there's one person who was, but I knew she wasn't going to like it, so I just gave her a book and said, "You're in it," and she was okay with it. That was the last book, not this one. Yeah, privacy is very important to me. The thing that you said about memory is also important, and I learned the hard way that particularly when you lose someone, when you're mourning or grieving the death of someone dear to you, don't do interviews about that person. Don't talk publicly about them until you've established your own position within grieving. And that's so important, you know. That also, in fact, the cover of the book is me, a self-portrait as Brancusi, because I had a big beard. But I had a big beard because my dad died, and I did the thing that I do, which is like just covered up, you know. And that was a good way to cover up. And I put on a bunch of weight, and I layered my clothes a lot. And then I went through the grieving process, and the cover of the book is the day that I chose to cut the beard off, and I was worried that I didn't have a jawline anymore, but I do, so that's okay. But yeah, I had to process it myself. And the other person that I'm thinking of, a public figure who died, who was very close to me, who I was very close to, and you dismiss or sideline or put in the background the really very important things that you take from that relationship, but also from mourning. The process of mourning is important. As you know, one of your great pieces is all about mourning. That's a run-on sentence, so I'll stop.
Right. Well, it also makes me think about loss in your life, because you've lost a number of people to HIV and AIDS-related diseases, and you've suffered through that and come to photography alongside that, which obviously freezes time and holds on to something that's past. And I guess it's also kind of a judgment on what's still alive when you look at a photograph, or when you choose to look at a photograph. So I'm just wondering how that whole period of loss affects how you do everything, because I can't imagine that hasn't impacted at all.
I think I was born into fear in some way, and I've always been a fearful person. It hasn't always been right in front of me, but it's always here. And HIV/AIDS in the 1980s was deeply terrifying for all of us. As a queer man, I was convinced that I had HIV for years, and I couldn't get tested anonymously. I was concerned about the Reagan administration and what they were suggesting, what was being whispered about camps where people that were positive would be sent. It was a horrible time. You guys will not ever meet two more neurotic people than the two people sitting on the stage tonight. And this is something we kind of love about each other is, you know, I actually brought my hand sanitizer. If you want some, I make my own. This is a really nice one, but it's rosemary if you need to. When COVID hit, it did not occur to me until I had lost 30 pounds and was really unable to sleep, and I would wash my hands 250 times a day. We're talking early 2020. And I eventually came to realize that the PTSD that I had from 1980s HIV/AIDS crisis had carried over to COVID in my mind, and it sent me into a complete and terrible tailspin. I'm now out of it and in therapy, and it's great. It's really helping a lot. I know that's a good laugh line, so you can clap or whatever, but it is helping a lot. And I realized, things about my past that came forward, also having to do with my father going away to war and separation anxiety and stuff like that. So it all kind of compounds. But I find myself now in a place where I feel like I'm confronting, when the fear is here, I just kind of go like that. And I'm like, you're there. I know that you're there. Fuck off. You're going to stay there, but you're going to be over here. You're not going to be here. And that's helped me a lot.
But it's in your book.
I didn't say that with an Irish accent. By the way, I should have done the Irish accent, but I'm terrible at accents. So,
I think the presence of COVID, is certainly very much in this book. There's tons of people in masks. There's a stillness. There's an isolation. There's a quiet. But I was curious about that relating to the 80s and the kind of melding of time and collapsing of it in it all.
In terms of photographs, I think that, well, I don't think I know this. I've never had a diary. I've tried and tried and tried to keep journals. It doesn't work. I write down pop lyrics, and that's it. I don't write down anything else except calendars. I do keep a calendar, and I've kept all my calendars since the mid-'80s, so I have all of them going all the way back. But photography for me is my diary, and it reminds me of a moment. What's interesting is that it was in the early 90s, myself and a great friend, a great artist from Brooklyn, Jim Cohen, filmmaker, we were having a conversation about timelessness in imagery. And we both had started, instead of framing out, framing in a case of a photograph I'm thinking of, the microwave popcorn bag, or the trash can in the background that indicates this is 1992. I used to frame that out. I now started at the age of 33 framing it in. And I didn't even realize I was doing it until I saw several, a year's worth of contact sheets. And I said, oh, something's happening here. And Jim, it was happening to him. That's Jim right there, that picture. That's him with his son. It was happening to him at the exact same time.
Yeah. It makes me also think about your use of photography as almost a healing or medical process, because I know that is a part of your life. And I think about how, you say it about yourself all the time, that you're distracted. You move in different directions. You're actually not distracted tonight, which
I'm working
nice.
so hard to be focused.
I'm noticing.
No, because I know that you really worked on these questions, and I don't want to do the run-on sentence, and I am jet lagged. I didn't take a gummy, so we're in fine territory, but.
Anyway, it always makes me think about how, sort of how flies are really good in emergencies, because their brain is 100% distraction. And so
a common housefly.
They can kind of be there in that moment. But you send me texts about divining rods that can create water, and then it's followed by a table at some store called All Mater, which called the Taryn table or something, and then it goes to this and that, and it goes all over the place.
Yeah.
And there's kind of no stasis. And photography is something that is still
anchoring.
And stops.
Yeah.
It stops.
Yeah.
And you told me when we walked in the door tonight, stomp your feet.
Yeah.
Like, just get settled, be there, stop, right?
Be right
so
here.
It's like, you didn't say stop, but I'm adding that to make the question work.
Yeah.
But it's, but is photography, do you think there's something medical in your attraction to it that's helping you to stop? And
Yes, I do. There are photographs, and not this book, the one just before it, which is a white cover with a blue portrait of Tilda Swinton, and who gave a beautiful conversation here at the Public Library a couple years ago. I had landed, I was on a plane. No, let me start, I'll keep this short. John Giorno was a great friend and someone who had great influence on me in terms of his attitude towards poetry, but also life and art. And he was a great Buddhist, and he died unexpectedly. He had a show in New York that turned out to be his last show, and I went to the opening, and I pulled him into the back room. Everyone was milling around. John was, I think, 79 or 80 years old. And I said, let me take some pictures just very quickly because I knew he was busy. So I snapped like 4 images of him against a blank wall and against one of his pieces. And a couple months pass. I'm in Europe doing press for something that happened 25 years prior with R.E.M. And I land into, let's say, Paris, London, I think it was. And I turn on my phone and I get a text message from a dear friend who's a friend of John's who said, John just died. And it hadn't hit the news yet. I realized that I had in my bag, under my feet, on the plane, the last roll of film that I had in my camera with the pictures of John, the last images I'd ever shoot of him, and a copy of his memoir, because he wanted me to blurb the back of it. And so I was almost done reading the memoir, and I had the film. It was actually 2 rolls that I had, but the second roll, it was the last pictures of John ever. And so I put them, the Tilda book was actually all images of women to begin with. And then COVID happened, and I expanded it when John died to include John, because he had a feminine, a beautiful vulnerability and a feminine intelligence to him in his work and in his friendship and in his approach to Buddhism and sex. If you want to be really shocked, that's a book to read. John Giorno's memoir is unbelievable. It's unbelievable. It's so shocking, like the things that he is not afraid to talk about.
Right. I haven't read it.
Read it. It's a quick read. It's really good. It's like, what's the guy's name who did Scotty Bowers? The real, like, the gas station guy who was he was a great hustler for every movie star from the 1940s forward. And he recently passed, I think. But Scotty Bowers, Self-Service, I think that's the name. Full Service, that's the name of the book. Good book.
You brought up there women, and you surround yourself with women. I noticed that a lot. And you ask for women to be at your side quite a lot. And it's artists, it's friendships, and your mother, who's such an important part of your everyday. You're going there tomorrow.
Yeah.
But can you it looks like reverence to me, and I think you use that in your books and your work as well. So what is that? Is it reverence? What?
Absolutely. A funny story. 25 years ago, I was living across the street from a lesbian couple. They were really cool, and they were really pushing the school board locally to accept them as a queer couple, and they were getting a lot of pushback at the time. This was 25 years ago. At one point, I don't know why, I was trying to impress them, and I was like, I was raised by women. And there was this like dead silence, and they turned to me and said, who wasn't? And I thought, you're right. We all were. It's an energy. It's an energy that women tend to have more than men, but I don't want to bifurcate. Is that the word I'm looking for? Even that much, because we're all these giant, complex mixes of different things, and that's what's so beautiful, I think, now about understanding of gender and understanding of sexuality and fluidity within both, and the differences between them, and how we all present and how we all think of ourselves, etc. And the importance of that, and what the 21st century finally has fucking arrived at, which should have happened much earlier in our particular culture, but didn't due to AIDS and also due to Reagan in this country and other factors outside of America. But here we are, and it's beautiful. But I love women.
Yeah, and can you talk about the artist there's an example of an artist that you were really committed to kind of bringing to light, Marissa?
Marissa Mertz. Oh yeah. Yeah, in the show, well, that's, I'm looking at what you guys are looking at here. That was Michelle Lamy. She's amazing. French, very conceptual artist. She's a boxer. Marissa Mertz was a Italian artist. There was a show here in New York about her several years ago, and I didn't see it, and I'm embarrassed that I didn't, make my way uptown to wherever it was. But she was a part of the Arte Povera movement, which was at a time when women were not recognized so much as artists. And late in life, I think she got the due that she deserved. And now that she's passed away, people look at her work through a very different lens. But I did a homage to her work in the show at ICA in Milan, honoring her place in art of the 1970s and Arte Povera and the importance of that. And it also, it was really her, a real lot her, but it also references Brancusi and also Jean-Luc Moulin, who's a French conceptual artist who I love, and also Pierre Huyghe. So, and this image is kind of the beginning of it. But she took that and did her version of it. I took her and him and did my version of the two of them, kind of like if Brancusi and Marissa Mertz had ever met, maybe my work is honoring their meeting.
And the inside cover of the book, there's an image you've titled "A Functional Stare Between Dreams and Work."
Yeah.
What's that about?
I actually don't want to say.
Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting.
It's a piece that I'm working on, let's say.
You're protecting the memory.
No, it's something that I've been working on for about 10 years, and it hasn't happened yet, and so I don't want to curse it. Yeah. But thank you for asking.
Do you believe in being able to curse things?
I think you can jinx things, yeah.
You do?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, you are a deeply nocturnal animal. More so than anyone I know,
Yeah.
right? You just, you refuse mornings. You don't engage with the morning.
Yeah.
So I was thinking about circadian rhythms and how they orchestrate our responses at so many levels. And I'm just curious about how your clock affects your work.
It definitely affects my relationships. sorry, Tomas. It's not easy. I'm up till 5 o'clock in the morning usually, and I go to sleep until 11, so I get 6 hours. And that 11 o'clock has always been my natural wake-up time. But right now, not right now because I'm jet-lagged, but I've been sleeping 9 hours, which is really underrated. And it's so great. But I'm naturally kind of, I think I'm talking slow enough that I'm making sense, but I'm very, very jacked since I was born. And I have to make myself slow down. And slowing down at night is not an easy thing to do.
But I'm also just thinking about photography, which is so much about light and just the effect of light on you and almost what your brain would look like and how that's affecting your daily operations, because your engagement with light is different than most.
Well, earlier when we were doing a sound check and you guys were in line, we were in here and we saw this image right here on the wall. And it's a for those of you who are not in the room, it's a portrait of a woman that looks like she's from 1870, maybe England. But there's this creepy blue kind of mountain range coming up, like dripping up from the bottom. And we realized it was the light that they put in to make the room look pretty. And they did a great job, by the way. This room is beautiful. But that light is the color of amber. I would call that an amber light that I used in the show in Milan, which was, I guess, really unusual. I just felt like the light was really important, and the light that was there was really white, and it was not that interesting. And amber to me, it's because, it's why the book is this color, by the way. Amber represents the 21st century and something new. It's a LED color that we didn't have before without a lot of filters. And now we have this new color. And so I made the entire, it was all black and white photography on the second floor. And I made the entire of the ICA in Milan amber colored. It took 4 days to wrap the lights, but we did it.
Right, and it's also the beginning and the end of the day. It's the moment when you
It's like, yeah,
touch
golden.
down.
Yeah, it's
You
like
don't
golden
do-
hour.
It's darkness or that.
Yeah. Well, the show was in the wintertime, so in the daytime you'd be there and you get one show, but if you happen to arrive just as the light is disappearing, it goes from daylight to this crazy amber that looks almost like you're in a dark room looking at photographic images under red light. Yeah.
So there's something very eerie about the shape of life in this book and in what you've done. There are these very uncomposed, unaware images of your family, friends, and love.
Okay.
And they're scattered alongside the shapes and curves of your sculptures. And then those shapes are put alongside billowing upward clouds and imprints of fire. And on top of all that, there's a grit of hair and dust and imperfections on the photo negatives that look both fake and real. It's
All
sometimes,
real.
It's all real.
They're all
okay.
real, yeah. All mistakes.
But it feels like in all of that collapsing, there's another presence. And what is that?
Another presence, what do you mean?
In the book, is it death? It feels like there's
No.
something kind of layered between it all, because it's these disconnected things of a life all mashed up into one with this kind of debris all over it and shapes and...
I love the way you think. This is really good. These are, there is, I was trying, the book is an attempt to rethink what a portrait could be. Mm-hmm. And you do this in your work. Mm-hmm. But I was thinking of a moment, a cloud shot from an airplane at 30,000 feet. And then the film, because the X-ray machines that we move through now in airports fog everything. They fog film. It's really a problem. And so the film is imperfect. I also, when my father died, I had given him this beautiful Contax T2, I think. And then I had one for myself, and he barely used it. I think he really liked fumbling. It was a point and shoot, a really fancy one. But he liked fumbling with aperture and all that stuff, and I don't. I just want to take the picture and be on with it. But I left his outside in the rain, and then I took pictures with it. And early in the book are images of a man, and then images of a structure that is filled with paint tubes. And that man was one of my teachers at college in art. He taught, Art Rosenbaum was his name. He taught me painting and conservation. And oddly, the image of him has these, it was shot with that camera, and so there's something happened in the camera. It looks like it's got grass thrown onto it. It's really screwy, right? But all of that to say, let me get back and then I'll stop to run on.
That feels like another presence. It's like there's something else.
There is death, I mean, for sure, because there's life. But I'm trying to rethink, like, what can a portrait be? Mm-hmm. Does a portrait always have to be this? And I don't think it does. I think it can be a picture of hands. Uh-huh. It can be a moment that maybe means nothing to you, but if you read the caption, it indicates that this was a moment to me that was profound and important enough that I put it in a book for you to consider. Mm-hmm. So the experience is different for the viewer or the reader than it is for me, and equally important. But again, I try to, I want everyone to feel really smart when they look at or listen to my work. I want everyone to feel included. Yeah.
So last question, and then we're going to go on to
Did we make it all the way
questions.
through?
Well, they told me at 7:45 I'm supposed to
Okay.
bring in the audience
Okay.
questions, but it's 7:45. But we're going to, okay. Well, thank you.
How many did we get through? Because I know you had a bunch.
No, we're through
We did? Okay,
a lot, but...
Thank you, Taryn Simon.
Wait, I'm not done.
Okay.
I'm not done.
Okay.
So, part of being American is amassing stuff, and you collect lots of stuff. You said your calendars, you collect archives, you collect tons of repeating items.
Yes.
In serial form.
Yes.
What is that?
Hoarding. It's called hoarding.
Yeah.
My mom and I watched the show Hoarders and then Extreme Hoarders, and we just shake our heads and go, oh God. In fact, when I was in the Boy Scouts living in Texas, her name was Justine, that's all I'm gonna say for privacy's sake, but Justine was a hoarder. And no one knew what that meant in 1971, but I still think about her house and her coupons. She had coupons everywhere. And S&H green stamps. And if you're of a certain age, you know what that means. But there's something else, and this will come back around, but I'm kind of fascinated with evil, I think, but from a distance. I don't like when people wallow in the horrors of humanity. I don't like it in contemporary art at all, and I'm not going to name names. There's so much poetry and so much beauty and so much that we are capable of elevating to. And we see that in everyday life if we choose to see it. Or you see, the shit. And so this is not about that, but in my fascination with horror, I wrote a song in the 1980s called Exhuming McCarthy about Joseph McCarthy, and I was really focused on Roy Cohn, who was his lawyer, and actually the engine. He was the Dick Cheney behind McCarthy's former US President George W. Bush. And of course, he was also the mentor to former US President Donald J. Trump, which is really unfortunate for all of us because he is, if nothing, a very good learner. Everything that we know of former US President DJT came from Roy Cohn, with the exception of intelligence. And Cohen was a prodigy. He took the bar exam on his 18th birthday. You couldn't take it before that, and passed cum laude. He was brilliant, but he was really evil. But he was also human, and there were human aspects to him that I don't want to touch on because he was really a monster. Okay, let's just leave it at that. His personal archive came up for auction, and I saw it here in New York, and I was like, fuck, that's kind of interesting. Like, I went to look at it, and I thought, this is going to be full of bad mojo and bad energy, and I don't want to have anything to do with it. And it was completely benign. So I put in a low bid, and I got it. I own Roy Cohen's personal archive. Thank you for the laughter. I then found at the same auction house, which is on 25th, by the way, if anyone's interested, East 25th, I found a photo auction, and there was a portrait of Roy Cohen by Robert Mapplethorpe. And it's a stunning portrait. You can Google it when this talk is done. It's an absolutely beautiful portrait of an absolutely monstrous person. But I put in a low bid on it. I went and looked at it, no bad mojo. So I put in a low bid, and I fucking won it. Nobody wanted it. So now I have Roy Cohen's personal archive. It's fascinating what's in there. It's crazy, super crazy. And then a lot of stuff that's really weird. And then I have this portrait of Roy Cohen, signed to Roy Cohen by Robert Mapplethorpe. So it is the image that he gave to Cohen after he took the portrait. Well, he misspelled his name. And I thought, was Robert a snarky, like, bitchy? Like, I don't think he was. Like, I don't think he was that person. So I called Patty Smith, and I said, Patty, I just got this picture, and Robert misspelled Roy Cohen. Cohen is C-O-H-N. He spelled it C-O-H-E-N to Roy Cohen, Mapplethorpe, 1987, whatever it was. And I said, was he that mean? And she's like, no, he was a terrible speller. So he didn't. And I guess Roy Cohen probably, it was unframed. He probably stuck it in a drawer. Someone found it, and I got it for nothing. Anyway, I hoard things like that. That's very interesting to me. I have hoarded, since I can remember, plane tickets, because it represents for me a nothing space. And it's a proof of being somewhere that is nowhere. You're between A and B. and A and B can be really sexy or really not, but I've kept every single one of those since the early 80s. Taryn and I have talked about my letting go of the Roy Cohen archive, and I'd like to officially, I think tonight, may I do this? Offer it. I'd like to offer it to the New York Public Library. And I can, because I love libraries, and I love this library, and I don't want it anymore, and it's got no bad mojo, so it's kind of interesting, and we can talk about it later, whoever is in charge here. But I want to do a little show, maybe at the library beforehand, of some prime pieces of that, along with the portrait by Mapplethorpe. I think that that would be a really interesting for the public little presentation. So we can talk about that later.
Great. And you're talking about keeping plane tickets and all sorts of things. It also makes me think of another of the picture collection at the New York Public Library, which I know you love, and we were talking about how it has folders full of images cut from disused books, disposed of magazines, and they're all collated according to these categories, like pack animals or wind in these folders. But it's been another thing that's always fought for its survival. And yes, for 100+ years. And I was thinking, I want to hear your voice tonight. And I know that you struggle with making music is also a very weighted and it's a deep pursuit, but the one time it comes super easily from what I've observed, I mean, obviously when you're on stage, it looks seamless, but is, you're clearing your throat.
No, that's when fear, I was just thinking about fear over here, and that's when fear is way the fuck over there.
But you do have this habit of it comes very easily when you want to make someone who's not well feel better. Or when it's a birthday. And you have this habit of singing Joyeux anniversaire to all your closest friends, obsessively and ritualistically. And I was just thinking about the picture collection and how if they had to reckon with your song, if someone attempted to close it, if you could just sing even happy birthday to it, or a tone even, like the yes, exactly, from
That's a good one.
Yeah.
Also, really nice reverb, really nice amplification job. Thank you, New York Public Library. I think my voice has gotten better as I got older. There's a song that we did, it was a little bit of an homage to Prince, who I didn't like as a person, but he's a brilliant artist, called Tongue, and it's me singing in a falsetto from a woman's perspective.
Oh.
Yeah.
Can we hear that?
No, I can't. Well, I lost my falsetto. I could sing it down here.
Okay.
But it's also...
Can we dedicate it to the picture collection?
No, it's a very sad song, though.
Yeah, well, this is a sad history.
Yeah, it is a sad history, but it's all the more important that the importance of that sad history be do you want me to sing Happy Birthday to a...
Yes.
Okay.
They'll have to...
In
if
French?
They ever tried to kill it, it can't grow another year. Yes, in French.
Joyeux anniversaire. Joyeux anniversaire, joyeux anniversaire, strange collection. Joyeux anniversaire. How was that?
Sorry, I couldn't resist.
We have 5 minutes.
I know, I couldn't resist. I'm going to audience. Okay. What was the first photograph you took that made you want to continue with photography?
A young girl, upside down under her desk. She had straight blonde hair, and it stuck up like a rooster's comb.
Okay, next question from the audience. Do you have any special ritual before you start your creative process, like your morning pages?
I do anything to not start my
I know.
Yeah. Dishwash, rearrange the magazines.
Okay, a South Carolina native asks, any thoughts, stories, or feelings about South Carolina?
Oof. You don't want to hear them. Yes, once the guy from Oingo Boingo was really mean to me backstage in Charleston. And he's now a big music guy for Hollywood, and that's fine. I don't speak ill of people publicly, and I forgive him. I just want to say I forgive you. I don't remember his name.
Of the 24, which hour is your favorite? Love, JJ.
What? Of the
I'll give you that one. You can keep it. That can go in your collection.
Of the 24, which hour is your favorite? Oh, I like 11:11. Yeah.
Have dreams ever influenced your life?
Oh, profoundly, deeply, unbelievably. There's songs that are the songs of dreams that, and my dreams are usually set in the future, and it's always apocalyptic, but it's okay, and it's really okay. So there's a lot of water, and but it's a calm feeling. It's not sad or upsetting, but everything's kind of held together with like shoestrings and 2x4s. Like it's really really apocalyptic, but it's okay. It's going to be okay.
But the shoestrings hold it.
There's shoestrings holding everything together, and I don't know, we're eating out of cans, but it's going to be okay. That if my dreams can offer anything.
Okay. You mentioned you see sound. Of the 5 senses, which is your strongest?
Smell.
Yeah?
Yeah. I have a superhuman.
You and the pregnant women.
Do pregnant women have a cute sense of smell?
Yeah, it's to protect the child.
Oh, well, that's smart. No, I can, especially.
You need to smell the gas and whatever else
that makes
is
sense.
coming. Yeah.
In New York, in the summer, I can raise your hand if you've heard me say this before. I can tell the difference between rat pee and human pee and larger animal pee or bird pee, and then how long it's been there. And so it's not always pleasant. And then people who wear too much cologne, I'm sorry, just cross the street. I can't do it. Speaking of which, speaking of cologne, we are going to do a book signing afterwards. I'm around people who are compromised physically. So if anyone here has a cough or you don't feel really that well, please keep your distance from me or put on a mask if you have one. That's just out of courtesy. Thank you.
Perfect. I think we should end on smelling rat pee. Yes, unless you have something.
I want to thank you, Taryn, for doing this. I know it was nerve-wracking, but
no.
you're amazing, and I love you.
I'm honored.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay.
And thank you, New York Public Library.